Well, you're watching World Talks on TVP World. My name is Sasha Farbach. The Arctic and the High North are of growing strategic importance to our security. Norway's expertise and leadership are essential to NATO's posture in the region. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte stated as he hosted Norwegian Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Støre in Brussels on Thursday. Now, as the EU moves to reduce strategic dependencies and strengthen its northern flank, Norway is emerging as a key partner, from supplying critical energy and maritime security to taking on a larger role in Baltic and European defense cooperation. Joining us now to discuss it all further is Rasmus Gjedssø Bertelsen, Professor of Northern Studies, UiT, the Arctic University of Norway. Good to have you back with us. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
So I want to start right away with the visit from Thursday. In fact, one of those things, before we talk about defense, is actually energy. Now, if we're looking at gas, LNG, that's been really critical for most of the EU. Now, the Prime Minister of Norway has lobbied for more use of this in Europe. The EU is trying to put on a kind of a drilling ban with an article from this morning from the FT saying, like, this is really critical. What do you make of his trip there yesterday in terms of energy security? Was he successful?
Well, I mean, Norway is one of Europe's biggest energy suppliers. Norway may be the EU's biggest gas supplier now. And of course, it's an almost symbiotic relationship between Norway and Europe, that Norway is a very close by major energy provider, and of course Norway is a close ally, and Norway is a stable liberal democratic state. So in many ways Norway is the ideal energy provider for Europe. And of course Europe is also a very convenient market for Norwegian energy exports, and of course the Norwegian economy, Norwegian society is to a very, very significant extent based on oil and gas production and exports.
Yeah, and as you said, rightly so, a third, I believe, of those imports from Norway. But yet the EU has had some opposition in terms of also classification, if we're looking at that drilling ban. Do you think this trip and what the Prime Minister has done, will that be successful now? Will Europe, the EU, and the institutions change their mind and be more open to that?
Well, I mean, if we look over the last 10 plus years, of course, things have changed very much. And maybe around 10 years ago, for example, in the European Parliament, there was great skepticism about oil and gas production in the Arctic. I think for example, the European Parliament, I think their view of what the Arctic consisted of, I think that was somewhat fluid. And I remember back then, Norway was very focused on, very attentive to not, how to say, the European Union, the European Parliament, precluding development opportunities in the Norwegian High North. But of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the breakdown of Russian-European relations, developments in the Middle East, they of course make Norway such an important and such a safe energy provider for Europe. So I strongly suspect that Europe will prioritize its energy security, and how much Norway can contribute to that will emphasize that over its previous reservations about oil and gas production in the High North.
Mm-hmm. And let's stay with the High North, but not now in energy, but let's talk about defense for a moment. Now, NATO is one of those key early members of NATO, meeting the Secretary General yesterday, the Prime Minister. Good words also from Mr. Rutte. How important, in your mind now, has the High North become? I know there's currently also one of these largest NATO air exercises, Ramstein, I believe it's called Ramstein Flag, over 200 aircraft. A lot of that is in the High North. How vital is this piece of real estate now in terms of NATO's military strategy?
Well, I mean, the Arctic is very important to international security, to European security. but it has been so for a very long time, and it's not good. It's not correct when, for example, Mark Rutte talks about growing importance. In a way, I would say that the importance of the Arctic to international security has been completely stable throughout the Cold War and after. And it is the question of the mutual nuclear deterrence between first the United States and the Soviet Union, and then after the Cold War between the United States and Russia. And if you look at a globe, then it's clear that the shortest flight path between North America and Eurasia is across the North Pole. And that's why the Arctic has been absolutely crucial for mutual nuclear deterrence between the United States and the Soviet Union, between the United States and Russia. And if you look at defense activities, etc., in the high north, throughout the Cold War, throughout today, in my view, the logic stays very stable. So the Arctic is it is very important to international security, but I would say it's a stable high importance.
Stable high importance. Let's talk about also in terms, you mentioned geography there as well. If we're looking at also some recent operational centers, I believe one of these special regional air operations centers has just opened in Bodø, I think just a few months ago. There's only a few of those in Europe. There's also, I think, an orbital spaceport or some space operations also in the high north. But at the same time, they've seemed to become a bit vulnerable. I think there have also been some espionage cases and 2 Chinese nationals, I think, being tried about this. So tell us about the interest, maybe not just from Russia, but perhaps also from China and other powers.
Yeah, it's all the mix between international politics, technology, and geography. Well, we don't have time to talk about space physics. But the high north is very practical. It's very useful for various kinds of space science, technology, innovation, etc. And there is an emerging space industry in northern Norway, northern Sweden, northern Finland, and that space industry is dual use, and therefore it's not surprising that dual-use space industry attracts international intelligence interest. So that China, for example, spies on Western dual-use space industry, that's not a surprise to me. But from a defense point of view, the key point remains that the Russian Northern Fleet, based off the Kola Peninsula, it is the last line of defense. It was so for the Soviet Union, it is so for Russia. And the threat to that is the United States, and Norwegian NATO membership, now Finnish, Swedish NATO membership, gives the United States very privileged access close to the Kola Peninsula. And that, of course, is a major concern for Russia. So in my view, that directs a lot of Russian attention to that area and potentially Russian threat to that area. But that Russian threat is, in my view, directed to the possible American threat to the Russian deterrence through these areas. I mean, of course, Russia is not concerned with the Nordic countries as such.
Well, interesting point there as well, and I know we're still some weeks away, but as you've already pointed out, I think as we see more and more in terms of dual-use technology, orbital stations, etc., how much of this and how much of Norway's role do you think will be at the table in Ankara in just a few weeks' time?
Well, I mean, as Jonas Gahr Støre and Mark Rutte, they allude to that Norway, and it's throughout the Cold War, Norway has been absolutely central to NATO in the high north, to the United States. And what we must never forget, and what in my view is the key thing, it's the Norwegian-American intelligence relationship that the United States and Norway have a very deep, since the early Cold War, a very deep intelligence collaboration in this area. So that's one point. And then, of course, we have Norway's contribution to European energy security. We have important Norwegian financial contributions to Ukraine. And we have other Norwegian contributions to the Baltic countries, to, defense presence in the Baltic countries and in Europe. And I think I have talked on your program before that Norway and also my native Denmark contributes in Poland very significantly to training Ukrainian forces.
Mm-hmm. I'm conscious of time. If I can just extend it for a moment also to Scandinavia's general point. We've also had just a statement from a few days ago. This is from the Finnish president, Mr. Stubb, who spoke to a newspaper in Switzerland and pressed on the idea of actually talking with Putin. I'm quoting, he says, "Yes, I think we should talk to Putin." What do you make of that statement? Also, generally, also Norway's position on this, if you can just share us briefly a comment.
I think it will be very, very difficult for Europe to re-enter diplomacy in that domain. That's that's the challenge of Europe, to find a common position, a common voice. Of course, between the United States, Russia and China, each are one voice. It's easy for them to talk together, and it is a big challenge for Europe to enter that. And then also, I think mutually there's such a deep distrust between Europe and Russia that I think re-establishing diplomacy will be very, very challenging also for, I think, profound mutual distrust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think also that's why a lot of this, in terms of more cooperation on defense, is so key right now. Norway playing a major role there. Look, thanks so much. Always a pleasure speaking with you there. That was our guest, Professor Rasmus Gjedssø Bertelsen. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching World Talks, but stay right here on TVP World for more news and commentary. Goodbye.